My name's Daniel, and this happened when I was 19. It was the summer before my sophomore year of college, and I had come back home for a couple of months. My hometown wasn't much, just a quiet little suburb surrounded by patches of woods and farmland, with one small lake everyone claimed was the hangout spot, though really it was nothing more than a muddy shoreline and some rickety docks. That summer was hot. I mean the kind of thick heat where the air itself feels heavy, like walking through a blanket you can't push off. Even at night, the humidity didn't let up, and every sound, the cicadas, the distant cars, the lapping water, felt amplified. Nights like that, my friends and I usually just drove around, blasting music, grabbing gas station sodas, and talking about nothing in particular until we got tired. This story takes place on one of those nights. I was with two friends, Ethan and Caleb. We were all restless, bored out of our minds, and eventually Ethan suggested we drive out by the lake. Not to swim or anything, just to drive the back road that wrapped around it. It was supposed to be haunted, at least according to every older kid we grew up with. They called it Dead Man's Bend, and they'd always tell stories about people seeing lights in the woods or shadows moving near the waterline. I didn't buy into any of that, but Caleb was the type who lived for ghost stories. So he immediately pushed for it, saying, "Come on, it's summer. You're supposed to do dumb stuff on summer nights." I eventually agreed, and we piled into Ethan's car, this beat-up old Honda with a muffler that made it sound way faster than it actually was. The road out by the lake was about 20 minutes from town. I remember that drive vividly because of how empty everything felt. The further we went, the darker it got. Streetlights became fewer and fewer until there weren't any at all. Just our headlights carving through walls of trees on either side. The air smelled different out there too, like wet earth and pine needles, with that sharp, sour undertone lakes always seem to have in the summer. When we reached the stretch of road that curved around the lake, Ethan slowed down. The pavement was cracked and uneven, the type of road you had to take carefully unless you wanted to bottom out your car. On one side was the tree line, and on the other was the lake itself, which was almost invisible in the darkness except for the faint glimmer of moonlight on the water. Caleb rolled down his window and leaned out, scanning the woods. "This is it," he said. "Dead Man's Bend. Supposedly, some guy crashed his car out here in the 80s. They never found the body." I laughed, more out of nerves than amusement. "Yeah, and now he haunts every group of teenagers dumb enough to come looking for him." But even as I said it, I felt this heaviness in the air. Not just from the humidity, but from the stillness. The cicadas were gone. Even the frogs and crickets were silent. It was like the entire road had swallowed sound itself. Ethan muttered something about how creepy it felt and slowed the car even more. That's when we saw it, something pale on the side of the road up ahead. At first, I thought it was just trash, maybe a bag caught in the weeds. But as we got closer, I realized it wasn't. It was a person. A man standing just a few feet from the edge of the road, facing the water. Ethan hit the brakes, and all three of us just froze. The headlights lit him up perfectly, an older man, maybe in his 50s or 60s, wearing a dirty white shirt and dark pants. His hair looked matted, almost greasy, and his hands hung limply at his sides. He wasn't moving, wasn't turning, wasn't acknowledging us at all. Caleb whispered, "What the hell?" But none of us knew what to do. After maybe 10 seconds, Ethan slowly pressed on the gas, trying to ease us past him without drawing attention. But as soon as the car started creeping forward, the man's head turned. Not his body, just his head, rotating slowly toward us. His face. I'll never forget it. His skin looked bloated, waterlogged, like he'd been soaking in the lake for days. His eyes caught the headlights, reflecting them in this dull, milky way, like they weren't really eyes anymore. And his mouth, God, his mouth hung open just slightly, enough for us to see darkness inside. Ethan swore under his breath and hit the gas harder, but not enough to peel out. As we passed him, I craned my neck just a little against my better judgment to see if he was still watching. He was. His whole head turned with us, unnaturally slow, until we were past him and swallowed by darkness again. Nobody spoke for a long while. The car was dead silent except for the hum of the engine and the occasional rattle of loose change in the cup holder. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. "That wasn't a real person," he said flatly. "It couldn't have been." I wanted to argue, to tell him it was just some homeless guy or a fisherman or someone screwing with us, but the words wouldn't come out. Deep down, I knew it didn't make sense. The lake was miles from any houses. There was nowhere for him to have come from, nowhere for him to go. And his face. We drove the rest of the loop without saying a word. When we finally got back to the main road, Ethan pulled into the first gas station we saw and parked. None of us got out. We just sat there under the fluorescent lights, staring at the empty lot around us like we were waiting for something to follow. Eventually, we went home, each of us pretending to shrug it off. But I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of that man's bloated face in the headlights. Here's the part that still gets me. The next morning, I checked the local news out of curiosity. Nothing unusual. No accidents, no drownings, no arrests. But when I Googled Dead Man's Bend again, I found an old article from the 1980s. A man had gone missing after his car was found abandoned by the lake. They searched the water for weeks but never recovered his body. The photo in the article was grainy, black, and white, but I swear on my life, it looked just like the man we saw. And the article listed the date of his disappearance. July 12th, the exact night we had driven out there. My name's Lauren, and this happened the summer before my senior year of high school. I lived in a rural town surrounded by endless cornfields, flat land in every direction, where the horizon just bleeds into the sky. If you've never lived near cornfields, it's hard to explain just how eerie they can be at night. The stalks grow taller than you, dense and rustling with every breeze. And once the sun goes down, they look like a living wall of black. That summer, my best friend Megan and I worked evening shifts at a small diner off the highway. We usually carpooled, and on this particular night, our shift had ended around 10:30. The air was hot and sticky, with no moon, no stars, just pitch black skies and the glow of the diner's neon sign. I drove that night, and the quickest way back to our neighborhood was a narrow road cutting straight through several miles of cornfields. It was a road I hated. No streetlights, no houses, no landmarks, just blackness pressing in from both sides, and the feeling like the corn itself was watching you. We were halfway down that stretch when Megan leaned back in her seat and said, "You know, I heard about this girl who went missing out here a few years ago." I groaned. "Don't start with that." But she did anyway. She told me the story in her usual dramatic way, that a girl about our age had been driving home one night, somewhere along this same road, when she disappeared. They found her car on the shoulder, driver's door wide open, purse still inside, but no trace of her. Some people said she ran away. Others swore something had taken her into the corn. I rolled my eyes, but the truth was, the story made me grip the wheel tighter. Out there, the cornfields were endless. If someone went missing inside, you'd never find them. We drove in silence after that, the headlights sweeping over the cracked road, the tall corn swaying gently in the warm night air. That's when I noticed it. A figure, standing at the edge of the corn, maybe 30 feet ahead, right where the road dipped slightly. At first, I thought it was a scarecrow. Farmers sometimes put them near the roadside. But as the headlights washed over it, I realized it wasn't. It was a person. A woman standing perfectly still in the dirt just outside the corn. She was barefoot, her long hair hanging over her face, and she wore this pale, loose dress that looked almost old-fashioned. Megan gasped. "Do you see that?" I nodded, but didn't slow down. Something about the way she stood there, motionless, with her head slightly tilted downward, made every instinct in me scream to keep moving. As we passed her, I tried not to look, but my eyes flicked toward the window anyway. Her face, God, it still chills me. Her eyes were wide and glassy, reflecting the headlights unnaturally bright, and her mouth was stretched into this expression that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't neutral either, just open, frozen, like she was mid-scream, but no sound was coming out. I pressed the gas harder, and we blew past her in seconds. Megan twisted in her seat to look behind us, then whipped back around, pale as a sheet. "Lauren, she's gone." I didn't understand. "What do you mean gone?" "She's not there anymore. She didn't walk into the corn. She just vanished." I told her not to joke, but my voice cracked when I said it. My hands were slick on the wheel, and the silence outside was so complete it felt wrong. We made it to the end of the road in record time, pulling into the first lit gas station we could find. Neither of us wanted to admit how scared we were, so we made excuses. Maybe it was someone messing with us. Maybe the darkness just made things look weird. But here's the part that's haunted me since. A week later, Megan sent me a link to a missing persons archive. She had been digging around, trying to prove the story she told me wasn't just a local legend. And there she was, a girl who had gone missing 10 years earlier. The photo was old and faded, but the resemblance was unmistakable. The same pale face, the same long hair, the same old-fashioned dress. And in the article, it described where she'd been last seen, walking along the road by the cornfields, the same stretch of road we had driven down that night. My name's Ryan, and this happened the summer after my freshman year of college. Where I grew up, there was this small lake tucked away in the woods just outside of town. It wasn't a tourist spot or anything, more like a local secret. The water was murky, the docks were falling apart, and half the time it smelled like algae. But it was the place everyone went on summer nights when they wanted to get away. That night it was me and 3 friends, Mark, Chris, and Jenna. We'd been at a house party earlier, but it was way too crowded and hot, so someone suggested heading to the lake. By the time we got there, It was close to midnight. The air was thick and humid, and the only light came from a sliver of moon and our phones. We parked near the dirt path that led down to the dock. The forest around the lake was buzzing with cicadas, and every step we took crunched against dry leaves and twigs. I remember feeling uneasy before we even got to the water. Something about how quiet the lake always felt at night, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. Still, we laughed and joked our way down the trail. Mark had brought a Bluetooth speaker, and he started playing music while Jenna kicked off her sandals and dangled her feet off the edge of the dock. Chris pulled out a six-pack, and for a while it was just the four of us, drinking cheap beer and talking about nothing. But after about 20 minutes, the speaker died. Mark swore it had been fully charged, but it just shut off, and no matter how many times he tapped the power button, it wouldn't turn back on. We laughed it off, but without music, the silence felt heavier. The water was still, dark, and glassy, and every once in a while, a ripple would spread across it, even though nothing had touched the surface. "Probably a fish," Jenna said when I pointed it out, but her voice was tight. That's when we heard it. Splash! Not close to us, but out on the lake, maybe 50 feet away. It was too big to be a fish, too deliberate. We all froze, leaning forward, trying to see through the darkness. The moonlight barely lit the surface, but I swear I saw something. Just the faint outline of a head breaking the water, then sinking under again. "Did you see that?" Chris whispered. I nodded. Jenna shook her head, muttering, "It's nothing, probably a log." But then it happened again. Closer this time. A head, just barely breaking the water's surface, then disappearing with a quiet ripple. We didn't speak. I felt my chest tighten as the realization hit me. Whatever it was moving closer. "Let's go," Mark said finally, his voice shaking. We scrambled to grab our things, but the dock creaked under us as we stood. That's when another splash sounded, directly to our left, so close it sprayed droplets onto the wood. Jenna screamed. I swung my phone flashlight toward the water. For a split second, I saw it. A face. Pale, bloated, with long hair trailing behind it like weeds. Its eyes were wide, reflecting the light like glass marbles, and its mouth hung open in a way that didn't look human. Then it slipped beneath the surface without a sound. I didn't wait. We bolted up the path, crashing through branches, barely able to breathe. My heart was hammering, and all I could think was that whatever was in the water could have climbed onto the dock at any second. We didn't stop until we reached the car. Mark fumbled with the keys, nearly dropping them, and when the engine finally roared to life, we peeled out of there without looking back. No one spoke on the drive home. It was like we were afraid that even saying it out loud would make it real. The next morning, I told myself it had to have been a hallucination. Maybe the darkness, the alcohol, the power of suggestion. But then Jenna called me. Her voice was shaky, almost a whisper. She told me she hadn't been able to sleep, so she started Googling. She found an old news clipping about a girl who drowned in that same lake 15 years ago. Her body had never been recovered. I asked her to send me the link, and when I opened it, I felt the blood drain from my face. The picture of the girl, her school photo, looked almost exactly like the face I had seen in the water. Same long dark hair, same round eyes. To this day, I don't know if it was her we saw that night. All I know is I'll never set foot near that lake again. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and hear splashing in my dreams, see those pale eyes staring up at me from the water. And every summer, when the nights grow heavy and hot, I think about that lake and what still waits just below the surface.